Welcome everyone to the next episode of Purposely. I have Maurice Schill here with me today. He's the CEO of JuJu. I'm sure you're all very excited to hear about what that means. Probably not what you think. Welcome, Maurice.
Thank you. It's good to be here on a lockdown afternoon. Getting to connect with people and share the story. Looking forward to our chat today.
Yes, so Maurice is lucky enough or unlucky enough to also be in Melbourne, so we're lockdown buddies. We have been in some form of lockdown for 7 months now, and I'm sure when I go back and listen to some of these podcasts in a few years, I'll just laugh because I feel like you actually couldn't even predict that this was going to happen or we would be experiencing what we're experiencing now. And I hope that in about 2 years' time, it'll be a distant memory and we'll laugh about it and we'll look back and go, wow, I cannot believe we did that. But at the moment, I'm not feeling like that at all. I'm just thinking, please, Dan, on Sunday, please tell us something good. Just something, just like one good thing. Like, Maurice, what would you love for his announcement to allow us to be able to do? What's the one thing?
Look, I think just being able, I don't need to see all of my friends. I don't even need to see them in a pub or an outdoor setting, but being able to invite a few people over to have a barbecue, a dinner, a few drinks. I think that's really what I've missed the most. And then probably a close second is the ability to go back to the beach and go kite surfing. I haven't gotten to do that in about 8 months. It's normally something that revitalizes me. It's so important to my life and I miss it a lot.
Wow, yeah, because we have the 5 kilometer rule, so we can't go outside our 5K zone. Pretty bizarre. I would agree that having friends over, like just having someone over just to cook someone a meal and just some variety in a social setting, and not being outside, like it's just it's really wearing thin. And like my family lives in the country, so I haven't seen them for months and months, and it's just the simple things. And I really would love to go to a restaurant with some friends and have a few drinks and a really beautiful meal. Like that would be amazing.
We were 2 weeks ago, when we were first allowed to go back and see people in the park. We now know exactly which parks correlate with everyone else's 5 kilometer radius. But the first time we went, it was really weird. One, to be outside and then to see other people. It was, it's something people probably feel like that a little bit when they come out of isolation, when they're in prison, out of solitary, whereas like, wow, other people, I can actually talk to someone. It was a weird experience.
It was absolutely it was like really exciting, but it was also, I felt that too. I felt really overwhelmed, and my son, who's 8, he was really overwhelmed and wanted to go home because it was too much, it was just too much going on. So it's really bizarre kind of social experiment what this is doing to people. Like, some people are finding it completely fine and kind of coping quite well. Others are really struggling. Like, I'm an extrovert, so I've really struggled. I get that energy from people, and you can do this kind of stuff all day and do this kind of meeting, but it's not the same. I'm a touchy-feely person as well. It's just it's been an experience.
It's interesting how before COVID, I would probably say I fall more on the introverted side of the spectrum. Like, I'm quite happy to spend time by myself. And before COVID, a lot of time was spent at home working. There wasn't anyone around. I was quite happy with that. But then once COVID hit, what I realized was that those times I'd go out and see my friends on Friday evenings or Saturday afternoons, it was always something nice to do, but I never really realized how important it was to me until I didn't have it anymore. And then I was like, wow, actually, I am, I do need that connection. I do enjoy spending time with myself, but I enjoy just as much spending time with other people. And that was hard to deal with at first.
Yeah, it's sometimes you don't miss something until it's gone, right? Well, that's what they say, absence makes the heart grow fonder. But anyway, we're digressing quite a bit. This is all about hearing about your story. So if you were allowed to go to a barbecue or go to a dinner party, I mean, how amazing would that be? And someone said, "Oh, nice to meet you, Maurice. What do you do for a crust?" It's a very Australian way of asking. How would you explain what you do?
Yeah, well, I normally start at the very beginning with people, and I think it's the best way for people to understand what I do and where it comes from. And I mean, in short, I am facilitating digital appreciation through technology, right? That's what I do. But this all started for me because my younger brother, Julien, and his nickname is JuJu, so hence the company name. This would have probably been 4 years ago now. Started doing this thing whenever I did something nice for him. He would start giving me JuJu points every time I do him a favor, and I always loved that. But it wasn't until my dad had his 50th, and we're a very international family, so we've moved a lot, and it's always an opportunity to see all of the people we haven't seen in ages. And what happened during, there's probably 80 to 100 people there over the week, everyone picked up this language. And my fiance's aunt, of course, won in terms of the most JuJus because she was in charge of cocktails.
Oh, okay, absolutely. Yep.
So she got a lot of love and a lot of JuJus from people. But that got me to pay attention to it and sort of piqued my curiosity to say, what's going on here? Why are people engaging with this silly concept in such a way? And that sort of correlated as well with me finishing up a job I'd been doing and looking for the next thing. And I felt, well, let me see what I can do with this. Is there something more? And that got me to then, I guess, follow the path and see, well, what is a JuJu point really, which led me to appreciation and gratitude. And the more I started unpacking that and the science, and I mean, there's just so much I'm still learning about it. And as well, the impacts it has on us, I went, okay, wow, this is not just a silly thing my brother created. It has real tangible and benefits to people, and felt that I had an idea now and something of value. And so figured out, well, who could benefit from this the most? And my first, I guess, port of call for me was businesses, because felt that could really help create not just tangible value for the business itself, but for the people working there and change their experience of it. And since we spend so much time at work, it felt like a good place to start making an impact. And so what we ended up doing was building a technology platform that allows people to exchange those JuJu points, share them with their tribe or their group, and I suppose collect them as well, or keep track of how many they've received and given. And that's the long way to answer what I do. Probably not the crust, it's probably the whole pizza.
I love it. I love it. No, I love what you do. I love the concept of it. And I have looked at a lot of the research around gratitude. I do a gratitude journal every day. And like I read this quote, or there's this famous quote, I don't know who said it, but I always think about it, is that when you're feeling grateful, you can't physically feel sad or angry or unhappy. Like there's just some kind of brain science thing to the feeling of gratitude and what it does to your brain. And there was a study conducted by the University of Massachusetts, I think, and they got people to do a 21-day gratitude journal, and you've probably seen this research. And what they found was at the end, people had reprogram their brains to scan the world for positive rather than negative. And I mean, in this day and age, I feel like that is so important, because we are just bombarded every single day with negative, and we're just like, it's just awful. And so it's such an amazing concept, but let's talk about the story behind that. And so how did you start off? Like, are you a tech person? Like, let's go way back to the start and hear the story of Maurice, because we talked about it before. You have a very interesting background. You're French German, and you've got a very interesting accent as well. So let's talk about where you started off and what you did before you created JuJu, because I'm sure people are interested in your entrepreneurial journey.
So just shortly, my parents left Europe when they were probably a bit younger than I was. They didn't feel like they wanted to live in Europe. They then both moved to Tonga in the South Pacific, and that's where they actually met. And since then, haven't really gone back to Europe. So the first 7 years of my life I spent in Ghana in Africa.
Wow, are you serious?
Yeah, so we lived in Africa for a bit, and then moved back to Germany for about 3 years, before then going back to Africa, to Cameroon, and then to Laos in Southeast Asia. So we've lived all over the place, and lived in some of the poorest countries, and I guess some of the richest countries as well. So that there's quite a bit of experience, and I'm just so grateful and actually feel quite privileged to have had that experience at such a young age. And I find it has, made me a much better person, much more empathetic and understanding, because I have seen how people live in completely different ways with different cultures from a really early age.
Wow. And so what did your parents do in those countries?
Probably the best way is to call it development aid.
Yep.
So my mom has worked, I think, most of her life, if not all of her life, for a company that used to be called GTZ and then got rebranded to GIZ, which I thought was a terrible branding exercise, because in English that sounds like jizz. But it's a German, so mainly government-funded organization that goes into countries, identifies what some of the main problems are, whether it's health, agriculture, corruption. They essentially look at, okay, well, what are the problems, where are the priorities, and then they set up projects to help deal with those. And then through a bunch of different, projects and initiatives, help alleviate those problems. So that's probably the best way, and both my parents did that, and have done until about 2 months ago, where both of them are retired now.
Well, good on them. It sounds like they've done some amazing work. But how do you think that impacted you growing up in a house where your parents were had that mindset of giving and trying to make a difference? Do you think that it influenced you?
Absolutely. I cannot not think about, well, how do I contribute back or do something of value for others? It's just, I guess, ingrained in me. And as part of growing up, I guess, and part of learning to understand the world, one of the things you learn is that not everyone thinks like you. And it took me a really long time to understand that not everyone has that view of the world, and not everyone feels like they have to contribute and give back. And until I realized that, I thought, this is sort of normal. But I think that was probably the biggest thing. And then the other one is, with that came a lot of conversations that happened in the household, specifically between my parents, or when they would have dinner parties and stuff like that, around conversations related to the work they were doing and the challenges they were facing, and which I think as well instilled that it's not completely easy, and there's always a lot of obstacles to making a change or making an improvement in some way. But I think that in many ways primed me as well for later interests and passions I have now in human behavior and psychology and why we do certain things, really trying to get into the nitty-gritty of things.
So lucky. What such a privilege to be in the company of such amazing people who inspire you. And it sounds like, I'm sure that it wasn't perfect. No one's family is perfect, but it's really great to hear. And what an amazing upbringing to be traveling around. Like, do you think that built your resilience and your adaptability in a way?
Definitely the adaptability. I think the probably, and this is something that came to me recently. I was listening to a book about attachment, and really in context of sort of Buddhist philosophy and how attachment is the source of a lot of our suffering. And it helped me to realize, well, if you're forced to move every 3 to 4 years, it sort of builds it in some capacity that friendships are transient, right? You're going to have these friends here, but then once you move, sure, I still have friends from all these places. We stay in touch through all of the lovely technology we have nowadays, but things move on and things change. And I think that's probably, and it took me a while to realize that, but I think that is something that's really helped me accept, I suppose, and live by, and is something that I go back to when things do get tough, and sort of go, this too will pass, and we'll get through it. So yeah, I suppose that does influence resilience as well.
Because one of the things that millennials are often criticized about is their lack of resilience, that they can't really cope with change, and they don't they just don't have any resilience. And it's really interesting because I've been doing the podcast. Well, I had a break because of homeschooling and everything else, but the millennials that I've spoken to, and I'm not sure if it's because they're all entrepreneurial and they work in that kind of space, so they've got a different mindset, but the majority of them are really embracing the lockdowns and the pandemic and thriving. And they're just like, yeah, man, like whatever. Like, let's just take it on. And it's kind of exciting, and they're seeing it as an opportunity. Whereas, like, honestly, I've really struggled, and like probably more than a lot of people I know, or maybe I'm just a lot more honest and outspoken and willing to kind of admit that I'm not coping. But what are your thoughts on, I mean, you're a millennial and I'm sure you hang out with millennials. Do you think that collectively the younger millennials are dealing with this better than some of the old codgers like me? I'm a Gen X.
Oh, that is a tough question. I don't know really how to answer that. I think I don't know. I think if you've experienced that they do seem to do that a little bit more, I think perhaps one of the reasons that is because we are much more used to connecting with people virtually, right? That's always been a big part. And so although, yes, I would love to go and see my friends, I'm also very happy to have a chat with someone on Zoom or like this, because it's sort of normal. Whereas perhaps if that's not been a part of your growing up, then it's like I'd rather fly interstate and go somewhere for a meeting for an hour and fly all the way back than go on a Zoom. Whereas I would rather save all of that time, just do the Zoom call. And so potentially that's had an impact on why we're more resilient, because at the end, I think what's the hardest for everyone is that lack of connection. I think that fundamentally is probably the biggest thing. And if we know how to connect in a way like in a digital way or in a more remote way through text and and emojis and Snapchat and all of the other tools that are out there, it's doesn't resolve the problem, but it makes it seem less big.
Yeah, I would agree. You know, I've probably thought that I was cool and I was all over that stuff and I was really up with it, but I don't think I am. I think I'm a bit I'm a bit old fashioned is what I've realised. I'm a bit traditional. I thought that I was quite cutting edge, but I'm not. Anyway, so let's kind of link back to JuJu. So is your background, have you got a tech background? Like, did you literally, like, what did you study at uni? Did you go to uni? And so what did you do before JuJu?
Yeah. So at uni, the first, since I've been in high school and since I can remember, I've always sort of felt like I want to get into business. I want to do, start my own business. That's always been there. And so what I did was, like probably a lot of people went, well, if I want to do business, I should probably study it. And so I moved to the Netherlands to study international business administration at Erasmus University in Rotterdam. And I think it took me about 3 weeks to realize that it's absolutely not what I want to study. And I had no passion for it because subjects like microeconomics and macroeconomics that just, they were just so far removed from anything that made sense or was applicable for me. So I probably, I failed. I think the only class I didn't fail in that whole year was organizational behavior.
Oh, there we go. Do you know what? I had a similar experience. I did a commerce degree because my dad told me to, essentially. And I hated it so much. I failed accounting 1, accounting 2, consumer behavior, and it was the worst. And I did finish my degree because my dad said that if I didn't, I was going to be working at Coles for the rest of my life. That was my future. And so I was like, well, I don't really want to do that. So I did do it, but yeah, macro and microeconomics, oh my God, what a joke. I don't even know how I passed it. Like I blagged, so I didn't do any study and blagged the exams and I got like a credit. Like I just bullshitted. But anyway, so how many languages do you speak? Can you speak Dutch?
Not really. I can understand it because it's very similar to German.
Yeah.
So I understand most of it, probably 80% of it. But do speak German and French, and my parents were always really good, quite smart. Always spoke French with my dad and always spoke German with my mom, and then went through English schooling most of the time. So that was, they figured that out pretty well.
Good, lucky, very lucky.
And now it's a bit, when people come to visit and have dinner with our family, they always get a bit lost as to what's going on because there's a lot of languages flying around the table.
Yeah, that would be confusing because I learnt French in high school and Italian in primary school. And so I get Italian and French confused. So when I try and speak Italian or French, it's kind of like French Italian. Is that a thing?
Yeah. I don't know. I have the same with Italian and Spanish because I've done a bit of, a few classes on it, but also Duolingo from time to time. And I mean, I do not speak Spanish at all. Yeah. But yeah, I do mix them up all the time.
But do you feel that once you've learned one language, like I've read about people who are trilingual or bilingual or whatever, they say that if you learn a second language when you're in your formative years 0 to 7 and you're fluent in that language, it switches on something in your brain and then you can learn pretty much any language if you want to. Would you agree?
Again, I don't know what it's like to just speak one language and then 2 and 3. Like it has always been 3, so I don't know if there's that switch. I struggle with language. Like my brain likes to work a lot more visually and mathematically. So language was always my worst subject in class and school.
Yeah,
But
you speak 3 languages.
yes, but I feel like I don't speak any of them very well.
Oh,
But that's my own perception. I do think it does, like, once you do learn a second language, it helps. And I think what my parents now live in Thailand and spending a lot of time in Southeast Asia, the languages there are so different
yeah,
to what we have in Europe. And I mean, most of Africa either speaks French or English.
yeah.
So you use those languages, but in Southeast Asia, it's such a complete language. And when you start learning a little bit about it, what made me notice is once you start learning about the language, then you start understanding why people are also behaving a certain way, because it completely changes your way of thinking about things as well.
Yes, yeah.
And
Like about
I think,
feminine, masculine, and just like the undertones of language and what it means in the context of that language. Like it's like the colloquialisms of the nuances of a language, right?
mm,
Which fascinates me because I love language, and I would be terrified if I couldn't speak to people because it would be like my worst nightmare.
mm.
And when I've been to Austria before, and obviously my husband is Austrian, and I remember everyone sitting around speaking Austrian, and I felt so left out. But I just was straining to work out what they were talking about. And by the end of the trip, I could get the gist of what they were talking about without really knowing what the words are. But that's language, right? It's the beauty of language.
That is language. And yeah, it's when you travel to a different country and you don't speak the language, you also learn how little what you say actually matters, because it's all in how you say it. And hands are really good for communicating as well. And yeah, so it's definitely a fascinating subject. And I think we don't really fully understand the connection between our language and the way we think just yet, and the impacts that is having in a lot of ways on things like international collaboration. So yeah, probably a different subject to unpack on a different day.
Other episode of this podcast, but getting back to your international business degree, so you hated it, you failed.
So failed.
And then what happened? What did you do?
My parents were good enough and smart enough to say, you still need to study, you still need to do something, so figure out something else to do. And I think doing that international business admin study helped me realize that it wasn't so much about of the business acumen and knowledge. It was really about how do you take an idea and create something out of it? How do you, that first entrepreneurial startup part? And so I started looking at studies that were more focused on the product design element and product creation, and ended up then moving to The Hague, still in the Netherlands, to study industrial design engineering there, with a focus on, I guess, human-centric design, so understanding how you really build things around, well, what people want and need and how they use it. And it was, night and day. Like the first class I went to, absolutely loved it, loved all the people there. Everyone was really passionate about creating cool stuff, about changing the world, about doing something, and attended essentially every class, participated in all the projects, did stuff outside, and absolutely fell in love with the whole design process and the creation, and going from something concept and out there and theoretical to something you can hold and use. And yeah, that, probably partially by chance, fell into it. But I think it was part of the journey as well, going through understanding what I didn't want to do, and then maybe I would have had to study one other thing afterwards as well. Sort of say, well, if product design wasn't it, maybe it would have been something else. Who knows? But it has been such a helpful tool, not just for my work and the stuff I do now, but just general. I mean, design philosophy or design thinking is great for living philosophy as well. Like, there's a lot of parallels and things you can take from each and apply to your life.
Absolutely. That's amazing. I love stories like that where you sometimes have to fail and hit kind of rock bottom and go, well, what the hell am I going to do to find the next thing, right? And also, I think some people would have just stayed in that degree and maybe just went along with it. You're intelligent. I'm sure that you could have, if you put effort in, you would have been able to pass and you would have got through it. But I think it sounds like you're like me in that if I don't like something, I can't be interested in it. Like, it's just, I'm either in or out. I'm like a very black and white person when it comes to that kind of stuff. And so very interesting. And so let's talk about JuJu. So when did you start JuJu, and what are some of the clients that you work with, and maybe tell us a story about one of the clients you're working with now and how it's impacted them?
So it's sort of officially started 2 years ago. And I guess what the standard track is in the startup world is come up with a concept, go out to companies, convince them that this is a great idea, that they would buy it, or get that buy-in, get them to essentially say, if you build this, I will use it, and then go and find funding so you can pay someone to program it, unless of course you're the programmer yourself. Yeah. And I really struggled with that. One, probably because I didn't have any sales or negotiation experience or any of that sort of stuff to fall back onto, but also because I felt as a concept it was quite hard to sell without giving people, without them being able to use it and see how it actually work. And so I felt, let me see if I can figure out how to build this myself first. And I'd come across during my studies some new platforms that came about that essentially were designed to be used by people who didn't know how to program but still wanted to build apps and platforms. And I did a whole bunch of research and tried a whole bunch of them, and probably couple of days before giving up and being like, this is not happening, I'm gonna have to go the other route. I was lying in bed and I can still remember it. I can't remember the keywords I thought of, and I was like, let me just try searching this. And it was the first thing I found, and it's a platform called Bubble. And a month later, I had built the first version of the app, and that was just like, it opened up all the possibilities. So of go, okay, now I've empowered myself to do this on my own, and I don't have to rely on external funding and support to get anywhere, which was really the beginning. And went back to a few people I'd worked for and asked them to trial it, and we learned a bunch of things. It's changed so much since the beginning. And then in March of that year, so March last year, I felt like I actually had something ready that I could go and reach out to, and started messaging people on LinkedIn, connecting with whoever I thought might be interested in this. And that's when I connected with a gentleman called Anthony Fargo, and he was working at a company in Sydney called Bench, who were at the moment looking exactly for something like that. And sort of through it, I don't know how it happened, but essentially 2 months later, we decided to set it up and try it out. And they still use the app to date. They are probably our biggest advocate, and I absolutely love working with them. I love going over there and seeing the team and interacting with them. And what I thought was fascinating when we first got people to actually tell us, well, how is it going? What I always thought would be great was, well, having a digital way to quickly send someone a JuJu or appreciation. People are going to love that. That's going to be great. It's going to make them feel good. It's going to make you feel good receiving it. But actually, when we started talking to people and doing some feedback sessions, sort of unanimously or across the board, really what the top benefit was for them was just the content it created, or the wall that they got to see what everyone else was doing that isn't just like the usual day-to-day work and all of your emails and this isn't working or that isn't working, which is a big part, I think, of business anyways, right? You're constantly dealing with problems. But instead it created a space where everything that was going right, and all the wins and the celebrations were shared. And people felt like, well, this is a great, people started logging in on Monday morning and starting their week just scrolling through, seeing what was happening, because it's allowed them to change their perspective on the business and what was happening without even having to participate in that sense, really by giving any JuJus. And I thought that was really fascinating. I did not expect that, or I did not see that coming. And yeah, that was a big component. And then, in March when COVID hit, they continued using it, and I've had a few conversations with them now and have said it's just been instrumental in keeping this culture of appreciation and gratitude going and visible in the business when everyone's working from home. And yeah, they continue to love using it, and it's also interesting to see the change in how people have used it over time, where at first it was sort of people were a little bit shy about what they were sharing and giving people JuJus, oh, thanks for doing that. And over time it's become a bit more rich, a bit more vulnerable, a bit more open, and people are really sharing the different wins and success stories and expressing gratitude more fully. And that's really awesome to see as well.
I love that. That's absolutely beautiful. And what an amazing experience when your app or platform or the tool that you create has a benefit that you didn't even know it was going to have. That must have been a good day for you.
It certainly was. And the part of the entrepreneurial journey and path is it was probably 9 months of development, right, of working on things. And sure, people were like, oh, this is a really cool idea, not knowing if it's going to work or do anything. And the ups and downs of doubt that you get, and sort of like, why am I even doing this? No one cares. When you've sent out 500 LinkedIn requests and don't get a response, you sort of go, okay, well, this is all silly. No, this isn't important. And just getting that, one company or that one person to say, hey, this has been amazing, makes all of that worth it. And that it was a good day. It really was a good day.
Well, I totally think you're onto something, because the old kind of cultural norms that we had in workplaces that the only feedback that you get is when you've done something wrong, and this whole culture of tough leadership, I really believe that those days are over. There are some kind of older industries that are trying to hold on to it, and what I've observed during the pandemic is they're the ones who are still trying to make their employees come into work, because if you can't see them, then they're not working. And these types of industries, and it's not all of them, but I've experienced quite a few: accounting, law firms, and professional services of any kind. They're the ones who are still attached to this old way of doing things, and they've got that old school culture. And I think that a lot of the organisations that are going to thrive in these environments that we're experiencing now are the ones that have a culture of fun and appreciation and acknowledgement and gratitude, and you're working with people, for people, and it's a family kind of tribe environment. And that's what JuJu, I think, does. It brings it all together in a really beautiful way. So if anyone out there is looking to ramp up their culture and inclusiveness and get people connecting, then definitely look up Maurice and his amazing platform, JuJu. And if people want to find more about what you do and JuJu, where's the best place for them to look, Maurice?
JuJuapp.io.
Yep.
And otherwise on LinkedIn, if you find me, there's only me and my dad called Maurice Schill. So I'm the younger, better looking version.
Absolutely. All right.
So quite easy to find us there. And we of course have, Facebook as well. And but the website's a good place to start. And LinkedIn is good because we tend to share a lot more of the activity and different initiatives and sort of the live and ongoing stuff there. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on the program today. I've really loved hearing your story, and you also have a podcast. So if people are interested in hearing more from Maurice, then check him out on his website, and we'll be sharing all of the links and all of his handles when we publish this onto Buzzsprout. But thanks for coming on once again, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. This was a really fun conversation. And yeah, we'll be on social, and if people have any questions and whatever, happy to respond there. Just on the note of the podcast, we did discontinue that, but have just started it again in a different format, which is now called the Gratitude Cafe. So again, on all of our handles, you can find that. But thank you for giving me this opportunity and allowing us to connect during these crazy times. Yeah, it's been fun.
Absolutely. You're a legend. It's a pleasure as always. I feel like we could talk for hours, so we might have to do another one about another topic soon.
Let's do it. I think there was a few things we could pick out of this one and continue our conversation on.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, Maurice.